Hello, gamers.
Alright, here we are, gamers. And gamer boys and gamer girls. Today we will be covering a very important and prestigious topic that also drives everyone who does it fucking insane.
Welcome
Colosseum.
to the Colosseum episode.
Oh god. We knew it was coming.
Episode where we will be discussing all of the ways in which your opponents in Colo attempt to make your life a living hell.
Oh yeah.
Because that's what all of the things that we are about to discuss are designed to do. Colo has essentially become can make their squad as painful to fight for the other player as possible.
Well, yes, but actually, yes. This is, for the most part, just a heads up, going to be a Fafnir episode because I do not know as much about Colosseum as I am the king of the adolescent people who do not use their arena orbs. I am only at stage 56 in Colo, and I am sub 2 million points in arena because I'm lazy. And so most of this will have to do with what Fafnir has to add because he is, in fact, a Heavenbinder owner.
That doesn't mean I'm necessarily good at Colo. Don't take that to mean anything.
All right. So the plan for today, essentially, just for those who are wondering, is we're gonna cover Colo meta, but we want to cover every single different aspect of Colo, as there's not just one Colo. Though a lot of people only do Hero, there's actually 4 classes of Colo. And we will be going over the meta for the bottom 3 classes and the history of the meta for the top class, Hero. So I feel like we could use an introduction into what each one of them is before we dive into the history of Hero Colosseum.
I think it's the easiest way to explain it is to work backwards.
Mm-hmm.
So Hero Colo, essentially a no holes barred. You can bring in any units you'd like. With whatever spheres you'd like, you can just... It's basically bring your best squad and put up your dukes. Hope
Absolutely.
you can get far. Conqueror is the same thing, except you can't use any units with a cost higher than 52, which pulls you out the majority of the recent Omnis. This doesn't mean that the tier is necessarily stagnant. There are some free units that get added to occasionally, but not near as much as the tier we're about to discuss after that. After that, we have Gladiator tier, which is again the same thing, except you cannot use units with a cost higher than 6, which again...
Faf, your audio is cutting in and out. Will you leave the call and rejoin?
Okay.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. Okay, yeah, that should be better. I moved the location of the server. Sorry for those of you watching the stream or listening to the video. Just want to make sure that the audio quality is as good as it possibly can be.
Well,
Alright, we should be good.
Starting again? Am I going back from the beginning?
We heard everything you said. I just wanted to make sure that we were tip-top.
Okay. I was in the middle of Gladiator meta, right? So, Gladiator, 46 cost or below. You can use it there. A lot of this is known as the free-to-play tier, because a lot of the units here are like event units, or I guess we'll get into it in detail later, but there are basically no summonable units that get used here. It's pretty much all event units. And then finally we have Warrior Colo, which limits your cost to 30 and below, which locks you out of every 7-star unit and every Omni unit. You have to use 6 stars.
Yeah.
Which has its own little meta that has become completely stagnant and is completely based on spheres. But
it will essentially never change, but we can get into that more in the future.
If you want to go to a Colo tier whose meta you can guarantee will pretty much stay the same forever, then do Warrior.
Absolutely. And we'll kind of get into the pitfalls of why Warrior is a tough thing to get into in a little bit.
Right.
So I feel like right now, now that we've covered all of those, I feel like we should move on to, I guess, the history of what Hero Colo is and the absolute unabominable beast that it has become.
Oh my god. It's all... Hero has always been a beast in and of itself because it always gets all of the broken things that
Mm-hmm.
people find out in terms of combinations immediately.
Yep.
And that slowly trickles down to the other tiers,
Mm-hmm.
though not as much anymore because you can't really trickle down the 60 cost strats
Mm-hmm.
when they're 60 cost and you can't use those.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll start from the beginning. When Colo released, we didn't have omnis back then at first, so the
Mm-hmm.
meta was essentially creating uh, an invincible dolk, which was a mitigator at that time who had pretty solid extra skill. You could just load him down with spheres, and he would never die, and he would outlast your entire team and deal
Yep.
big damage. That's going to become a trend as we go later on because Colo is pretty much always about either creating a team that is either invincible or beats you before you really have a chance to combat it.
Yep. This
Later,
essentially, in my opinion, set the precedence for what Colo is and will be, or will always be, because there is no better strategy than making yourself unkillable or making it so that you kill everything before they get a chance to respond.
right. And it's worth noting at this point that Angel Idol meta reigned supreme. All
Mm-hmm.
of the units in Colo basically had to have Angel Idols, and because we didn't necessarily have spheres that gave us those at that time, the meta was entirely based around units that gave themselves AIs. So
Mm-hmm.
you would see a lot of 7-star Selenas around this time as like an incredibly budget version of it.
Yeah.
Selena actually lasted a surprisingly long time. And in fact, even when the Omni era kicked in, like Omni Selena retained that usefulness.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I guess that's the perfect segue into the Omni era, where it essentially
Mm-hmm.
became like you bring the 6 heroes Omnis in addition to invincible Dolks. You might see an
Yeah.
invincible Negress or two.
The
Though
step
that's
up really happened here when the Omni era came about in full force, because we began to see the instances of power creep that, while there has been power creep in this game for a long time and it is much more rampant now, we begin to see angel idols become extremely common. We begin to see the ability to stack more powerful spheres along with extra skills that just make your teams so much more frustrating to fight. And this all came about essentially at the advent of the Omni era, and is has only gotten worse and is only going to get worse.
right. And of course, at the advent of the Omni era, the two factions that would become Kalo's meta emerge almost immediately. The first one to emerge is the Juno Seto defense lead meta,
Mm-hmm.
which was quite long lasting because she had one of the best defensive leader skills in the game for Kalo.
Mm-hmm.
And the counter to it, which was the Terry offense lead, because
Mm-hmm.
we got the King of Fighters collab pretty much at the start of the Omni era.
Yep.
So, to go over the Juno defense lead strategy briefly, basically what her leader skill offered was a chance AI on her leader skill, which would allow you to survive hits and allowed you to create teams uh, that benefited from that. Also
Mm-hmm.
had damage when BB when damage taken, and because BB drain wasn't rampant at that time.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I don't even think it existed at that time.
Yeah.
You could just build up BB gauge really quickly, and an unprepared team would get utterly smacked.
Mm-hmm.
The Terry meta focused on being extremely strong, winning super fast, and hitting really hard.
Yeah.
So
I
a
feel like
very
right now is a good time to note that this is before Terry received his buff.
right. This
Because
is
that
the
might
original
confuse
iteration
people.
of Terry. He
Yeah.
still had 20% damage reduction to 1 on his leader skill, which
Mm-hmm.
was the big reason why Terry lead was so rampant.
Mm-hmm.
And then you would commonly see him run with 4 Azurais, which was just the generic big damage that has AI and doesn't really die easily thing
Mm-hmm.
that could just sort of cheese through a majority of things you would encounter.
Yeah.
You would also see a couple of hit count meta uh, strategies emerging around this time
Mm-hmm.
with like Mazerka leads and their team of Mifunes that
Yeah.
were just sort of designed to rip through AIs.
Mm-hmm. I feel like I'm sorry, you didn't cover Mifune yet, did you? Or like his absolute usefulness in terms of offensive ability to not cancel AIs as an AI null, but hit you down from full to empty, so that it could bypass your ability to have an Angel Idol because of the way that Angel Idols proc.
That's because all three of these strats came out pretty much
Mm-hmm.
simultaneously because I think Mifune released like what when Juno released and then
Yeah.
Terry released shortly after that. So all of these strategies pretty much came back to back to back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, I feel like because I remember, I mean, I began playing when you introduced me to this game, and that would have been around the time that actually the first LE that I ever pulled was Zero. So it was around that time, the release of Zero, that I began really getting into this game. It was maybe a couple weeks before that.
I'd
Um,
say that around that time you were in the Juno meta.
Yep. And so I was gonna
And
say, I remember you showing me not necessarily bragging, but showing to me and talking about how awesomely defensive your Juno was for your Colosseum squad, and me just
oh yeah.
drooling over the fact that I wanted a Juno Seto so bad.
I also remember you getting an Azurai, and then
Mm-hmm.
I didn't pull an Azurai for like months
I
later,
was
but my
so happy that Azurai carried me through the entirety of content with his 40% all parameters buff on leader skill. It was great.
jeez.
Anyway, I digress.
Uh, the Colo meta actually stayed that way for quite some time. I mean, Terry and Juno never really stopped being relevant. It just came about that more and more things came to replace them. In fact, I don't even think that the Colo meta really shifted too much until the release of the first arena batch. And
Mm-hmm.
even then, it was more or less a question of do you want to slot Lanza instead of Juno? Do you want to slot Zeku?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to slot those types of things?
Yeah.
Eleanor also released around this time, but didn't really see much use because we didn't. I don't think that many people knew how random target functioned in terms of
Mm-hmm.
how it combines with BB Drain. But I think that, and I don't think INSA was being run in Hero Call at that point, and certainly not an INSA that would get off BB consistently enough for you to see what that would do. Because
Yeah.
she was basically the only random target Omni at that point. I think that random target was not necessarily a popular thing.
Yeah. Which is completely different from now because we have the existence of things like Wondrous Aegis, which just combo with random target in such a strange fashion.
I don't think Wondrous Aegis combos with random target very well.
I thought it was that the way that the random target proct allowed the healing of Wondrous Aegis to work differently in a more effective manner. That's something we
I
can
think
cover in
that's
another episode.
Yeah, I think that's how it works with multiple attacks, but at least for in terms of wiles, I
Oh,
know that
yeah.
it counts any random target attack as just the first hit
You're right,
and
you're
not the
right.
full combo.
Yeah, I was thinking of
I
triple
don't know if that's
attacking, not
different from
random
Wondrous.
target. But yeah, we can cover that
Yeah,
later.
yeah. Um. Oh, right. Like the meta stayed pretty stagnant from there. I mean, like it was always going to be a match between super offensive leads, hit
Mm-hmm.
count strategies, and what you could do to defend against it.
Yeah.
And already the meta was either you're building your team around nuking the enemy down as fast as possible and piercing their AIs, or banking on your AIs to survive and then countering. And that's pretty much been the basis of what Colo became,
Mm-hmm.
where you either won instantly or it became a massive stall match.
Yeah.
This
Essentially.
this did not change in terms of variation very much as the years went on, though a few more players came to the scenes. I know that on release of Dream and Wintia, the meta underwent another shift because this was also around the time that the rest of the colo spheres were opened to us. I think that initially we only had the first 50 tiers, but we eventually got the next 50.
Yeah.
And people discovered one very valuable thing that would pretty much define the colo meta for a good year, which is that when you use random target attacks and you have BB Drain, either from Eleanor's leader skill or from the 2 L gifts that were added in those 50 tiers, which I believe are Loki's Howl and Wails of Lamentation, then you could cause that BB Drain to activate multiple times, effectively locking down your entire enemy team and just preventing them from Brave Bursting. And that was huge. If you weren't facing off against a hit count strat, which were becoming increasingly more difficult to pull off around that time, then you were effectively screwed.
Yeah.
And then people discovered that you could become immune to that by making units 0 BC, which means that they had no BC cost, which led to the introduction of things like Fina 0 BC, which had like 25 BC fill on SBB.
Oh god.
You could fill your entire team and then use BB Drain to just hit the opponent repeatedly until they just could not Brave Burst. And then that evolved even further to include Behemoth with Warcry.
Yep.
Which added a 1000% DOT to his attack. And because of his ridiculously high base attack, this led to basically any non-Earth unit getting hit with 99k damage at the end of their turn, which was way more health than any unit in Colo actually had. You could just get insta-nuked by DOT.
Unfortunately.
And of course...
Reminds me of Dichroma.
Yeah. I think this was around the time that the Vortex Arena units started getting introduced.
Yes.
And they also changed the hero colo meta a little bit, because a lot of people started running like mono fire teams with Blaze, and Psy released. And we started seeing mono water teams with Psy to try and counter Blaze, but they couldn't really like completely counter it out because Blaze was still extremely strong.
One thing that we also saw was the advent of extra skills that would provide additional angel idols on top of spheres and possible SP choices, which really continued to make things more frustrating, as previously, you know, especially at the advent of the Omni era, things like, you know, Selena had 1 angel idol that you had to work through, and now you're working through the possibility of 2 to 3 or more.
Right. Oh, I almost forgot to mention, Psy became incredibly prominent around this time, both because of her extra skill providing status immunity for the entire party, but also because her BB was random target, and she inflicted status ailments on it, which effectively led to a few matches simply being, does your opponent have status negation? If not, then you win.
Yeah.
Because you status them to death, you will BB drain them to death, they will not be able to do anything. Yeah. And that was essentially the counter to Blaze, because Fire didn't really have a great way of negating status ailments other than a sphere for it.
And this was also before things like Steer Wheel, which don't have a lot of use, but when it first came out, I know that I used it because of its ability to reflect damage as well as null and cleanse in Colo.
Speaking of reflecting damage, then we got Dranoel, who was used in a couple of meme strats to basically bounce the damage back to the opponent, which was... It was a fun gimmick, but I don't think it really... I think it did see some competitive play, but I don't think it was really meta-defining.
I mean, for a long time, I know that there was... This was around... Dranoel's release was around the advent of people beginning to use leader skills that really did not apply to a lot of the parameter boosts and things like that to the units that were on their team, because they were more concerned with the other effects, such as when Dranoel came out, you would often run into teams that would just, you would smack the shit out of them, and then they would reflect all of the damage back onto you, which means that even if they had 20,000, 30,000, 35,000 health because they weren't getting a parameter boost from Dranoel, you were still reflecting all of that damage back onto them, and that was not elemental dependent.
Right. I also forgot to mention that around the time that the Psy Water team came up, Dolk while did not directly make a comeback, his spiritual successor came in Ilm. So people started building invincible Ilms.
Yeah.
Who had similar stats in terms of what he would do.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really think there was anything that really countered Ilm. Cerise released to not too much fanfare, as Thunder didn't really have the tools to be like super meta in colo at that point. Fiona was pretty much the same, though she did have quite a presence outside of colo, ironically more so than she actually had in colo.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, of course, there was Siardha, who did have some presence in colo, and normal hit teams loved Siardha, but the problem was that didn't translate well against everything else, especially when you had like invincible Ilms staring you down that just did not die no matter what you did to them.
Yeah.
You basically had to rely on you having Behemoth to DOT meme them out, and even then you would have to do it fast enough to where the Ilm wouldn't just kill you.
Another interesting point about, since we're covering these units right now themselves, just another interesting point that I would like to bring up is that the interesting fact about these VA units is that they had viability outside of just colo and arena. They were monstrously damaging nukers. Blaze was the first unit that I ever saw that could wrap himself back to negative damage in the sim. So that was another reason why these became so hugely prominent, is that you weren't just summoning these units to use in Vortex Arena or in Colo and Arena. You were summoning them to use across the entirety of the game.
Right.
Which essentially, in my opinion, led to even more people having things like Blaze and Psy and Dranoel and so on and so forth.
Right. This cycle pretty much continued. I remember a few of the VA Season 2 units had some viability. I know Vail saw great competitive play. Yan and Yuan not so much until a little bit later, but we'll get to that. Honoka had a little bit of viability as well. I saw a few Honokas.
Yeah.
Didn't really see that many Tates, though I believe she was probably the dark horse in that she definitely had her place to be.
I believe that she was made to directly combat Behemoth as well because of her DOT mitigation. You know, a mono Thunder unit for Vortex Arena that has DOT mitigation, that just screams, all I do is counter Behemoth.
Right. And then there was Ebony, and I know that Personet released around that time as well. And they both worked in a similar vein, although Ebony was more directly focused with countering DOT. Both of them had very prominent roles, though I think because Personet could revive and heal, she had a little bit more of a prominent role in that I actually saw a little bit more of her than I did Ebony.
Yeah.
That isn't to say that Ebony was bad, though. Ebony's great. VA Season 3 is when we got our big change to the meta, which came almost immediately with Kaena, who had an introduction of a debuff called AI Null, which effectively prevented the opponent from activating Angel Idols for 2 turns.
Yep.
And also a leader skill that, along with ABP and CBP boosts, gave 30% BB gauge reduction. This enabled you to 0 BC teams easier than ever before, kind of in the same vein as what people used to do with Fina. And it allowed you to 0 BC AI null, which meant you could effectively kill an entire enemy team before it could even act.
Are you talking about Q-Tong? I'm sorry, I got distracted for a moment.
Q-Tong, I don't think Q-Tong. Maybe Q-Tong was out around that time. I don't remember if Q-Tong came out immediately, but I know that people did pull it off.
I know that people use Q-Tong Kayena teams, so I believe Q-Tong was around at the time that Kayena was released.
I think Q-Tong released a little bit after Kayena, but I do know that Fina was definitely used around that time because she could fill the entire team's gauge, and then they could go for the 0 BC.
It was terrifying going up against the team and seeing, 2 Finas two Finas, 2 Q-Tongs, even a Hail, and 3 Kayenas in there. You pretty much knew that you were fucked. If you saw
Right.
that, it was just like, all right, see you later, kid. You're out of here. Because they would just AI null your whole team and just shit you into oblivion with their damage. It was absurd.
This is also the time where Juno officially got beat out of the meta
Mm-hmm.
because Juno's not competing against that. It just nulls her the benefit of her leader skill straight up. There's no
Yeah.
purpose, Juno, and this, of course, got even further boosted with Qtong. All of the Battle Maidens added their own spin on this. I know
Mm-hmm.
that Saren added extra action to the formula, which allowed you to, of course, cast even more AI null SBBs to
Yay!
further increase the chance that you would get AI null to stick. You've got Bailey over there, who on top of AI null has damage reflect, which although wasn't super widely used in hero because you can't really damage reflect if you're dead.
Yeah.
For the few strategies around that time that did allow you to survive, it did allow you to kind of meme your opponent down and then counter with AI null to instantly kill like a crippled opponent.
Mm-hmm.
Fenia, around that time, didn't really see too much use outside of that because she released around the time that Deku released. But
Mm-hmm.
she did see a prominent role in Colo because she was the only Battle Maiden to have random target, which meant that if you could get off her BB, which was a rarity if you were doing 0 BC, then you could, of course, attempt to inflict BB drain or ailments for as much as that mattered against 0 BC.
And you know, Fenia did have her usefulness in Colo because you're not going to bring a Deku into Colo, but you are going to want her extra skill status null if you're not getting it from another spot.
Right. Then, of course, Vanilla came out and pretty much didn't kick Kayena out, but became a far more universal version of Kayena to use because all of these light units like Qtong and Personet that had been kind of lurking in the background, not able to get stats from Kayena,
Mm-hmm.
came to the forefront in full force.
Yeah.
Because now you could get Paradigm 3 on a team under Kayena, 0 BC it, and then nuke the crap out of everything because nothing had any sort of elemental resist to light. So that became the dominant strategy for a long time, to the
Will you
point
do me
where
a favor
Vanilla...
real quick?
What's up?
Will you explain the vanilla curse once you finish what you're doing? Because I feel like it's directly pertinent to what we're referring to here.
You mean my summon vanilla curse?
Yes.
Or okay. So
Fafnir
on
story
vanilla
time.
release, I was determined to pull 2 vanillas. And what ended up happening was I got my first vanilla in like 15 summons or something, and I got a second one on summon 26, and I still had a few tickets left over. And because of how the Vortex Arena summons worked, they gave out extra tickets that slowly built up to a guaranteed vanilla summon. And you would get 4 of those tickets from the gate and 1 from the Vortex Arena itself. So I asked, you would also get, wait, no, never mind. So what happened was I asked around and I was like, should I just do the remaining 4 summons to get to step 30 so that I get another guaranteed vanilla? And people were pretty much unanimously yes. And I think I got like another vanilla on step 30. So I was up to 3 vanillas and I had the 4 tickets left over. I did the tickets that slowly built up to the guaranteed, and I think I got another 2 vanillas while in those 4 tickets that I got from the gate. And then of course,
man.
so I'm up to 5. And then I got the guaranteed ticket, which for me was guaranteed from the Vortex Arena itself, so I was up to 6. And then later on another gate that was sort of like building up to a brave summon, I got a 7th vanilla. So I now have 7 vanillas. I effectively know the ins and outs of how Vanilla's mech works.
Yeah.
It's
It was
unnecessary.
incredible.
Vanilla.
It was absolutely incredible. Regardless, I'll allow you to continue, but I felt as if that Fafnir story time was essential for this episode.
I've never actually used all 5 vanillas at once. I think I've only raised the 2 animas I got.
Someday.
Someday I will raise all 7.
Someday when we get the vanilla only Frontier Rift TM.
Yes.
Alright.
Vanilla. But yeah, colo essentially became mirror matches between these 0 BC AI and all teams where you would pretty much be guaranteed to win on offense and be guaranteed to lose on defense.
Mm-hmm.
And that was essentially what you had to live with. It turned colo into a sort of chicken game where you would just continue force closing out, try and prevent yourself from getting a loss so you could rack up perfect wins like repeatedly.
Yep.
That was essentially what you did, or you were just done.
Yeah.
Lico released without too much fanfare, and I don't think the meta for colo really changed too much from there until we got to Cerinthus, at which point we discovered that we could use Cerinthus leader skill, which gave 20% all damage reduction, in conjunction with extra skills that also gave passive mitigation to stack to 100% damage mitigation, which effectively made your team immune to regular damage. And for a majority of AI null teams, this completely locked them down because they couldn't actually kill this.
Yeah.
They were just stuck there forever, and the majority of them didn't have DOT either, which means they were essentially stuck. So of course they then put DOT into play, and things sort of balanced out to where 100% mitigation worked perfectly against teams that weren't prepared to handle it, but against teams that had some sort of counter for it, it just kind of fell apart. Then later on, and now we're at the current colo meta.
Do you mind if I cover this? I have been doing some reading up on this.
Oh boy, yes.
So,
you may.
Essentially, the current colo meta mirrors some of the older colo metas in a terrifying fashion. What we're looking at in terms of the current meta is a 100% the ability to stack the reduction of damage to 1 to 100%. Essentially, what that means is no matter what damage you take, other than damage over time, it will automatically be mitigated to 1. No mitigation pierce can get through that. Nothing but DOT can actually hit you because everything else turns to 1. Now, the question that I asked when I first heard this was, how the fuck is that possible? Now, Terry recently received a buff with the re-release of the King of Fighters collab, in which they gave Terry among other things, a 20% chance to a 20% chance on leader skill for all allies to take 1 damage.
He already had that.
Sorry, yeah, but among other buffs. But that was something he already had, but now he's, used widely.
Right.
And alongside this, people realized that you could stack that 20% with the 10% that is given from the extra skill of Vail and Vidron, the Season 2 Water VA unit.
Is it 10%?
It's 10%.
Oh, it is 10%.
Yep. And so, on top of this, you can use spheres to boost that number even higher to get it to 100%. Now, Vail and Vidron gives a 10% chance to take 1 damage, and the current meta team is actually Terry and then 4 Vail and Vidrons, right?
So you just see a lot of Dragon Boys.
Exactly.
Led by angry Ash Ketchum over there.
That alone gives you 60% chance to take 1 damage, which then stacked with 2 20% spheres will put you at 100%. But it gets worse. If you'll take a look at the...
There is a sphere. There is 1 sphere in the game that gives 25% damage taken to 1, which is actually the sphere that is currently behind Cranky Kong's head.
Cranky Kong wearing it like the crown that he deserves.
Resolute Silence, which has become probably the dark horse of the RC7 spheres, to where the people who don't do colo don't really care about this, but the people who do colo absolutely worship this sphere.
Yep. alongside this, you have Resolute Silence, but that begs the question. You get your 100% chance to take 1 damage on all units. Great, congratulations. So you have 100%, but what about damage over time, right? It begs the question, when you get hit by, something like DOT from Behemoth, what do? In comes Formless Chroma. The upgraded...
And 72 forms. Either one works.
Yeah. So... Oh, I'm trying to... I'm doing extra skill, I know. So, Formless Chroma is the upgraded form of 72 forms. It's essentially all it takes is 172 forms and 2 Whispering Shards from Dichroma. Right. It gives you, among other things, ready? DOT mitigation. But how much DOT mitigation does it give you? Well, it reduces... I'm sorry, I'm stupid. Yeah. It reduces DOT duration by 3 turns. There is another spell I was thinking of. Which essentially makes it so that you don't take DOT. Which means that...
There is actually one way you can take DOT, but no one is going out of their way to do this.
What is it?
In order to actually inflict DOT on something that has Formless Chroma, you need to get a team to Paradigm +3 to boost your buff and debuff duration so that you can get a 3-turn DOT to 4 turns. And even then, that means you get 1 turn of DOT off. Yeah. And more likely than not, if you're fighting a team of 4 Vails, all of whom have burst heals, they're just going to heal it back anyway. So...
Yeah. All of whom have BB reduction as well, so good luck getting your BB off as well. Unless you're 0 BCing, but again, okay. But yeah, essentially what Formless Chroma allows you to do is create a literally unkillable unit. In colo. Linathan brings up a good point in the stream chat in which he notes that 4 Vail and Vidron squads is really used as a troll team, which I agree to an extent, but the issue that they run into is any leader skill lock, extra skill lock, or sphere lock destroys that squad's entire strategy, because they no longer have that 100% damage reduction of 1, and essentially all you're facing at that point is a mediocre squad of 4 Vail and Vidrons. They don't have their ultra powerful gimmick that will automatically shut you down.
No, they just have damage reflect to annoy the crap out of you if you happen to not kill them.
Essentially, yes. But it's not going to be as strong as other things. Essentially, you could beat it with a, vanilla team, Paradigm 3, whatever, if it ends up getting LS locked, extra skill locked, or sphere locked. But in in most cases that might not happen. It could, but it might not. If it doesn't, you're facing an invincible team.
Right.
The other thing is that you're not running a lot of DOT units in general. I mean, you can, but if if people are running 4 Vail and Vidrons at a Terry, they're not exactly going to have a lot of DOT to counter.
So basically what this means is that although this team, as Lena is pointing out in the chat, is that it lacks BC generation and overall damage. But the thing is that if you can get that troll team to work, then essentially you don't even have to deal damage anymore or even try to win. All you have to do is count down the timer, and the fact that you can deal some damage to the opponent while they can deal none will make you win every single time.
Yep.
It's the dumbest strategy ever, and it shouldn't work, but it absolutely does.
It completely does.
So that means... just to recap, that every meta team in Hero Colo is essentially some variation of 0 BC AI null, 100% mitigation strats, or damage reduction to 1 strats. And all of them are based around some method of making your life as hard as possible. The only thing that makes it somewhat better is that at least the AI null teams kill you quickly. The Vail and Vidron reduction of 1 strats and Cerinthus strats...
You get to sit there and fucking suffer.
You get to sit there for all those 99 seconds on both rounds. And even if you turn it to 3 times speed, it's still just as painful to watch your team get slowly whittled away with a death by 1,000 cuts, while
You
they
get to
sit
sit
there and
there
just
and
grin.
think about what you've fucking done.
Yes,
That's it.
that
That's
is
what you get.
that is Hero Colo
Welcome to
now. That
Colo.
is enjoy your stay. You will
Yeah.
either die immediately or you will stare down the immovable wall. And I guess this does mean that Kahlo does answer the eternal question of what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object.
The immovable object fucking
Everyone
wins.
else suffers.
Yeah.
Everyone else suffers.
And yeah, I was thinking to myself when I first heard about this, okay, this is the pinnacle. It can't get worse than this. And then I realized something. I think that every single time Kahlo gets worse than it is right now. It is only downhill from here, everybody. It's only going to get worse, and I'm sorry.
Eventually, we're going to have mitigation piercing attacks added to BBSBB, and then we're going to start like trying to pierce mitigation, and then we're going to like use pierce AI null strategies, and then we're going to find a way to stack enough elemental mitigation or evasion that mid-pierce doesn't pierce. And then we're just going to recover any HP that would be lost from pierce. And then we're going to do like mitigation purge a la Dichroma.
Oh god.
And then we're going to like then the 100% mitigation strats are going to die, but the damage reduction to 1 teams aren't going to care because that's all passive in spheres.
Mm-hmm.
And this is just going to loop in on itself. Kahlo is never going to stop being this. This is just how it is now. You're either with it or you're dead.
Yep. You have to be meta.
Yeah.
Sorry. It's just how it is. Okay, so next up, I guess we've kind of beaten the shit out of this dead horse, which is the god awful thing that is Hero Kahlo. So I guess we can move on to Conqueror.
Oh boy.
Now for Conqueror, Gladiator, and Warrior, we're actually not going to be covering the full history because that is both something that I am not well versed on and also would make this episode absurdly long.
Yeah.
So we'll start with the current Conqueror meta, which I would put, in if I could describe it in any way, it would be a sphere meta that mirrors the mini or the hero meta, just in a miniature version.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
Just for context, I've played Conqueror Kahlo a grand total of like once, and I don't think Recoome has played it at all.
Nope.
So in order to get the best view of what this meta looks like, I contacted Empyreus, who is the #1 player in Conqueror Kahlo, to get an idea of what that meta looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems to me that it is just, like Recoome said, it's a miniature version of hero meta, except on steroids, because it has spheres and units now that weren't around when this was meta in hero.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially what this meta looks like is there is AI null still. People run 7-star versions of Kaena, Bailey, and Finia for that. And they're usually BB level 9, which means because you can't get AI null on SBB for the 7-star versions of the Battle Maidens.
Uh-huh.
So you have to keep them at Brave Burst level 9.
Yeah, as well as your Zelion. Don't forget that. Go ahead. Just had to slide that in there.
A lot of the units that were really prominent in the old hero metas are very prominent here. So you'll see things like the Invincible Ilms. You'll see BB drain strategies on random target units, whether that be the aforementioned Finia or Ebony and Personet. You'll see Warcry behemoths who run rampant in the tier with 1000% DOT. You'll see 0 BC features. You'll see Wrath of Grant behemoths, Mifunes, and Zekus. You'll see a few new faces here that weren't out at the time this meta was out in Hero, like Edia. You'll see the 7-star versions of Ebony and Personet. and the defense leads are pretty much like Lanzas and Junos,
Yeah.
the less so Junos because AI null.
Mm-hmm.
And then offense leads are like Zeku, and you might see an Eleanor because her leader skill gives BB drain, which combined with even more BB drain just leads to you just knocking the opponent into the dirt on a very consistent basis. And again, all of this knowledge is from Empyreus.
Empyreus,
So
thank you so much for giving us this in-depth look into the meta of a version of Colosseum that Faf and I are not well versed in. That definitely made this episode a lot better. So thank you very much,
definitely,
sir. We salute
I
you.
feel like I would have just been spitballing what Conqueror's meta was.
Essentially, yeah.
Oh, also Al-Akat in a similar vein to Ilm. Really strong unit there, even though he's pretty terrible literally everywhere else.
Yeah.
Just
Very
felt
true.
that.
Al-Akat, an interesting unit. Which may come up in a future episode in which I hope to do a lore discussion on some of the tie-ins that we have been discovering as of late.
We rant about lore.
Oh, I hope we can do it. I look forward to it.
Yes, so do I.
Next, we can move on to the Gladiator meta, which in my notes I have essentially put as an unending hellscape of nothing but geodes and then a bunch of the letter A.
I feel like that's word for word what it is.
Yeah, I feel like we could genuinely sum this up in one meme, which is who would win, an I and 4 rocky boys, or an I and 4 other rocky boys. That's it.
Yeah,
and with some spheres on them.
Occasionally you see some variation. Occasionally you'll see like a Logi.
Yeah.
I've seen a couple people use Theodore, though I can't for the life of me understand why. I've seen a few Kitsus, but I think Kitsu mostly died out.
Yeah.
Because of geodes primarily.
Geodes are just so powerful.
Hell, I think I've even seen a few Mizerkas down there trying to do like Mifune, like Mifune strats from way back when with updated spheres.
Mm-hmm.
You see a lot of weird stuff down in Gladiator, but I think that the most prominent and the thing that's topping pretty much everything is a team of I, a bunch of geodes, and maybe another free-to-play event unit slotted in there just for shits and giggles.
Yeah, essentially. Also remember that just like Hero, just like Conqueror, just like Gladiator, and just like Warrior will be, it's all a sphere meta. Right. Especially as you get further down. The units like geodes and I, they're phenomenal units for the class that they're in. But what defines whether or not you win is what spheres you have. If you're running buffer jewels and phantom gizmos on your geodes, you're not going to get anywhere. But if you're running heaven binders and unghas or whatever, you're going to get a lot further.
Right. That's very much a place of, if you have spheres, you will win harder. If you don't have the spheres, then you will just beat everyone else who doesn't even have the team to do. Which, to be fair, encompasses a fair bit of Gladiator. You don't start running into the I and a bunch of the Rocky Boys until, or what I like to call the Geode Inquisition, until you get to a good chunk of the way into Gladiator. So you can be generally assured that if you're running that team, you can at least net a good 50k points before you start to the Geode teams. Maybe even further than that, depending on how late you wait in any given season.
Yeah, I don't know how the point variation differs between the different tiers, because you have things like the Battle Maidens that are giving ABP CBP boosts compared to
Gladiator doesn't have any of that.
Well, yeah, which is why I'm wondering, how much the point variation is. Regardless, I see that if you have the right spheres, you have the geodes, and you have an I, you're going to be winning a lot more in Gladiator than you are in late game Hero.
Yeah, Hero is just you either have the units or you basically keep going or until you hit what I like to call the skill wall.
Yeah,
which is the point where skill stops being what factors into your wins. And it becomes more of a battle of do you have a counter to the BS that's in front of you right now? If you don't, you're dead.
Yeah. Absolutely. I feel like we can move on after that, because that's pretty much it, to our final piece in which we talk about the warrior meta.
Which has been, as I said, completely stagnant ever since it became 30 cost.
Mm-hmm. And the reason it's going to stay stagnant is because Gumi has absolutely no incentive, reason, or anything else whatsoever to release more units that are less than 30 cost. There's no reason.
Yeah. So you'll basically see a lot of units down here, like Rugal, who has ruled the tier pretty much from release. 6-star, of course. All of these are 6-star.
Mm-hmm.
You'll see 6-star Gazia, so if you upgraded him to 7-star on release because he was a great unit at 7-star, then yeah, can't you?
You can get these units technically through UOC.
Not Gazia.
Well, yeah, some of them you can, I should say.
Yeah, you can get Dolgrag, or what we call Washing Machine God.
He looks like a big old washing machine.
Yep. You can get him through UOC, and he's basically the Hulk smash of the tier. You give him Wrath of Grant, and if it's no BB rule, then you just sort of endlessly smash the opponent.
Yep, pretty much.
You'll see some Avarice because a lot of the teams down there don't really have a lot of status negation. So you can kind of cheese them with stat affliction and also get mitigation at the same time.
Yeah.
Which is why you see quite a few Avarice down there. You'll see Juno and Ensa. Juno in a similar vein to Avarice, where you need mitigation, and occasionally she can chance a revive, though I find that it's not super consistent.
I think it's the opposite of consistent. I think it's an extremely lucky instance if you get a Juno revive. Yeah.
It's like 8% revive, but you can create like semi-invincible Junos.
True.
There's Ensa down there who needs to be BB9 for this. It basically wants to spam her Brave Burst and lock the opponent down with Wails of Lamentation. There's Corzan and Golzo leads, who are pretty much, I believe, the two leads that you see the most. You will see a lot of Corzan and Golzo in that tier, because they have extremely solid leader skills for that. Golzo I see pretty much everywhere. When I was running Warrior, my lead Golzo.
Yeah.
You will see like Juno defenses, and that's pretty much what Warrior is. It's essentially, you have the spheres and Elgifs. It's even more severe in Gladiator in that respect, where you will either have those or you will lose repeatedly.
Yep. And remember that spheres are a huge deal in these, because when you have a stagnant meta like Warrior, the only thing changing that is the release of spheres that are giving more, angel idols, giving higher stats, giving greater boosts, giving, better AoEs, better attack, things like that. Those are the things that are going to change.
Right. Yeah, definitely. There's not really much that changes in Warrior over time, which makes it both very difficult to get into in terms of the high upfront cost you'd have to do to raise these units that you will literally use nowhere.
Absolutely.
But you also need to have the spheres to manage that. So I see a lot of people who do hero until they get Heavenbinder, and then they're like, you know what, I'm going to go down to Warrior and become the living incarnation of Bane for everyone down there. And then they just take these, they raise these teams of Gazias and Dolgrags, Juno, Corzan, Golzo, what, and they just wreak havoc down there. And everyone, no one talks about it because not many people play Warrior, but I'm willing to bet that they do it because it's really fun to go down there. And not, I know, you just kick them with Dolgrag or something similar to it. Maybe 6-star Mifune if you don't have Dolgrag.
I'm actually going to be getting my Yggdrasil Edict this month, hopefully before 4 times Arena and Colo. And I think I'm going to do a little adventure down in Gladiator with some of the spheres that I have and some geodes and an I lead and see what I can get done. Because I'm getting tired of hero, and getting put up against teams that I just absolutely know that I have no chance of beating.
Yeah, Hero has a way of burning you out really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Not so much in terms of Conqueror, because
Mm-hmm.
there are very few people who are running meta squads in Conqueror.
Mm-hmm.
But those people who are getting pretty much 100% win rate, and if
Yeah.
you get matched against them randomly, you just die.
Yeah. I'm definitely going to try Gladiator. I will update. If people want an update, let me know in the comments. Maybe I'll post a picture of an absolutely ridiculous geode with Yggdrasil Edict on it or something. So,
Fight Ilias's team.
what'd you say?
Fight Ilias.
What is Ilyas's team?
I think it's the I and 4 geodes.
I wonder what his spheres are, though, because they're considerably better than mine, so...
We shall see.
I guess so. I think that just about wraps it up in terms of Colo history and meta.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much everything.
Mm-hmm.
As we said at the end of Hero Colo, everything goes downhill constantly.
Mm-hmm.
So you either keep up or you basically keep going until you hit the ceiling and then you just stop for the season.
Yep, absolutely.
And for those who are thinking that like Colo is too hard and can nerf it, the reason that Colo is so hard is because we want to win.
Mm-hmm.
Like, people want to win just as much as you do. And they are willing to go to whatever lengths in order to make that happen. And
Absolutely.
some of them go far further than I think they actually need to.
Mm-hmm.
Though, evidently, now they do need to, because as soon as one person starts doing it, it
everybody else
necessitates
does.
everyone doing it.
Yep.
So if you want to blame anyone for the state of Colo, simultaneously blame Gumi for making these things possible, and then blame the people around you who are making these squads and are inherently making it so that Colo has to stay this way.
Blame your friends, blame your family, and blame the high-level community. And Gumi.
We are making Colo this oppressive place, both because we want to win and sort of for our own amusement.
The high-level community definitely gets a kick out of all of your pain and suffering. Just kidding. That just about sums it up for this episode, though, guys. As I always say, discussion is completely open in the comments. If you disagree with something that I said, please tell me. If you disagree with something Baf said, please tell us. We want to have an open forum in the comments, and we hope that this helps bring some light to the different tiers of Colo that previously I feel like a lot of people don't even know about or play.
Yep.
So, thank you so much, guys, and that just about concludes it.